I'm Audrey Mitchell, 28, and I never thought I'd be standing in a bridal shop staring at my phone in complete disbelief. The text from my mother was clear. We're pulling the wedding funds. We're not funding this circus. My hands trembled as I read it again. How could she do this to me and Ryan, my fiancé of 6 months? What my mother didn't know was that her cruel rejection would trigger a series of events that would change our family forever. Before I share how I turned my mother's wedding sabotage into the greatest victory of my life, drop a comment telling me where you're watching from. Hit that like and subscribe button if you've ever had to stand up to a controlling family member. Trust me, this story of revenge, reconciliation, and finding my voice is one you won't want to miss. Growing up as the daughter of Judith Mitchell was never easy. My mother, a 5-6-year-old real estate mogul with an empire spanning 3 counties, ran our family like she ran her business, with an iron fist and zero tolerance for deviation from her vision. My father, Walter, a 5-8-year-old corporate lawyer, was successful in his own right but had long ago surrendered any real decision-making power in our household. Our family had money, but emotional warmth was in short supply. Designer clothes and prestigious schools couldn't make up for the constant criticism and conditional love. Every accomplishment was met with "you could have done better" rather than "I'm proud of you." I spent my childhood and teen years desperately trying to earn my mother's approval, only to fall short time and again. After college, I finally broke away, building my career as a marketing executive at a tech firm. That's where I met Ryan Campbell 2 years ago. He was the new software engineer with kind eyes and a laugh that made me feel instantly at ease. Unlike the privileged, status-conscious men my mother had always pushed me toward, Ryan was genuine. He'd grown up in a middle-class family in Wisconsin, worked his way through college, and valued experiences over possessions. "You're the most authentic person I've ever met," he told me on our 3rd date as we walked along the waterfront eating ice cream cones. "You don't try to impress anyone." I almost laughed. If only he knew how hard I'd worked to shed the approval-seeking behaviors my mother had instilled in me. But with Ryan, I could just be myself. When he proposed 6 months ago, on a simple hike to our favorite lookout spot with his grandmother's modest diamond ring, I didn't hesitate. This was the partnership I wanted, not the strategic alliance my mother had always envisioned for me. The problems began the moment we announced our engagement. My mother immediately took control, creating spreadsheets, contacting planners, and speaking about our wedding rather than mine. "The Mitchells have a reputation to uphold, Audrey," she declared during our first wedding planning lunch. "We'll need to book the Grand Terrace at the Westmore Club. Nothing less will do." I tried to explain that Ryan and I wanted something smaller, more personal. "Smaller?" she scoffed. "What will people think? Your father's law partners, my clients, they'll assume we can't afford better." That was just the beginning. Every detail became a battle. The guest list bloated from our desired 75 people to over 250, most of whom were my parents' business associates. The simple, elegant dress I loved was rejected as pedestrian. The band we wanted was dismissed in favor of a string quartet my mother deemed appropriate. The real disaster came when our families met. Ryan's parents, Thomas and Patricia, flew in from Milwaukee for what should have been a celebratory dinner. My mother managed to maintain her smile for approximately 15 minutes before the interrogation began. "And where exactly did you attend university, Patricia?" she asked, though I'd already told her that Ryan's mother had worked as a nurse after community college. Patricia smiled warmly. "I got my nursing degree from Milwaukee Technical College. Not fancy, but it let me help people and raise a family." "How quaint," my mother replied with a tight smile. "I suppose we all make choices about our priorities." Ryan squeezed my hand under the table as I watched his mother's expression fall. By dessert, my mother had managed to insult their hometown, their careers, and even their gift of a handmade quilt which she called rustic, in a tone that made it sound like a disease. As the wedding date approached, tensions escalated. Everything came to a head during a family dinner at my parents' house 3 months before the wedding. My mother had invited Charlotte, my older sister who had always been the good daughter who followed the approved path, along with her investment banker husband Gregory. "I've decided to change the color scheme," my mother announced over the main course. "Navy and silver will photograph better than that forest green you were insisting on." I set down my fork. "Mom, we already ordered the invitations with the green accents." I canceled those, she said dismissively. The new ones will arrive next week. Ryan, who had been silently enduring these dinners for months, finally spoke up. Judith, with all due respect, this is our wedding. Audrey loves green. It's her favorite color. My mother's eyes narrowed. Young man, when you're contributing more than 5% to this wedding, perhaps your opinion will carry more weight. That's enough, I said, my voice shaking slightly. Ryan is my partner. His opinion matters more than anyone's. I see, my mother said coldly. You've clearly forgotten who you are and where you come from since meeting him. That was when Ryan did something no one had done in our family dynamic. He stood up to her directly. Mrs. Mitchell, I love your daughter more than anything, and I will spend my life trying to make her happy. But I won't sit here while you disrespect her choices or our relationship. My mother's face flushed crimson. Without another word, she threw her napkin on the table and stormed out of the room. The silence she left behind was deafening. Later that night, as Ryan and I drove home, he asked the question I'd been dreading. Has she always been like this? I nodded, tears forming. Yes, but never this bad. I think she sees you as a threat because you encourage my independence. Ryan took my hand. We'll get through this, together. I believed him, but I had no idea how much worse things were about to get. 2 months before our wedding date, I discovered just how far my mother would go to maintain control. I had scheduled a meeting with our wedding planner, Bailey, to finalize the floral arrangements. When I arrived at her office, she greeted me with confusion. I wasn't expecting you today, she said. I thought we settled everything with your mother yesterday. My stomach dropped. My mother? I wasn't aware you met with her. Bailey's expression shifted as she realized her mistake. Oh, I assumed you knew. Judith came in yesterday with some adjustments. Those adjustments turned out to be a complete overhaul of every decision Ryan and I had made. The venue had been changed from the garden amphitheater we loved to the stuffy Westmore club my mother had wanted all along. The farm-to-table catering was replaced with a formal 5-course meal. Even our carefully selected playlist had been scrapped in favor of classical music. She said you'd been too busy to handle the details, Bailey explained uncomfortably. She signed all the change orders and paid the difference in deposits. I felt physically ill. And you didn't think to call me directly to confirm? Bailey fidgeted with her pen. She's been the one handling all the payments. I just assumed. That afternoon, I confronted my mother at her country club, where she was having lunch with her friends. I asked to speak with her privately, but she waved dismissively. Whatever you need to say can be said here, dear. These are all friends who have known you since you were in diapers. Humiliation burned through me, but I refused to back down. You went behind my back and changed all our wedding plans. How could you do that? She sipped her wine casually. Someone needed to salvage this event before it became an embarrassment. The only embarrassing thing is how you're behaving, I said, my voice trembling with anger. This is my wedding. Is it? She countered, setting down her glass. Because from where I sit, it's my checkbook funding this affair. Therefore, it's my wedding. Her friends shifted uncomfortably in their seats, but no one spoke up. Then maybe we don't want your money, I said. A cold smile spread across my mother's face. Let me be clear, Audrey. It's my wedding or no wedding. Those are your options. For the first time in my life, I didn't cave to her ultimatum. I need to discuss this with Ryan. He's my partner in this decision, not you. That evening, Ryan and I had a long, difficult conversation about boundaries and what our wedding truly meant to us. I don't care where or how we get married, Ryan said, taking my hands in his. I just want to start our life together. But I do care about how your mother treats you, and I think it's time to draw a line. The next morning, I called my mother and told her that while we appreciated her financial support, we would not accept it with so many strings attached. We would scale back the wedding to something we could afford ourselves. Her response came 3 hours later in the form of that devastating text. We're pulling the wedding funds, we're not funding this circus. The financial fallout was immediate and overwhelming. Deposits were lost as vendors who had been contracted by my mother suddenly canceled. The new venue my mother had booked refused to return the deposit when we tried to change back to our original location. The custom dress that had been ordered, not the one I wanted but the one my mother had selected, was non-refundable. I sat in my car in the parking lot of the bridal shop, sobbing uncontrollably. When Ryan called, I could barely speak through the tears. She's ruined everything, I managed to choke out. Ryan was at my side within 30 minutes. He held me as I cried, then gently tilted my chin up to meet his eyes. Listen to me, Audrey. Your mother hasn't ruined anything that matters. We're still getting married. The rest is just details. As if the financial sabotage wasn't enough, I discovered another betrayal that cut even deeper. My sister Charlotte called, not to offer support, but to lecture me. How could you be so ungrateful? She demanded. Mom was trying to give you a beautiful wedding, and you threw it back in her face. She was trying to control every aspect of my life, just like she's always done, I countered. That's so dramatic, Charlotte scoffed. You've always been the rebellious one, always thinking you know better than everyone else. I was stunned by her characterization. I'd never been rebellious, quite the opposite. I'd spent most of my life trying to please my mother. The final blow came when I discovered my mother had been systematically poisoning my extended family against Ryan. My cousin Jessica called to check on me and reluctantly admitted that my mother had told everyone Ryan was only marrying me for financial gain. She said he's pressuring you to cut ties with the family so he can isolate you, Jessica explained. She's really concerned about you, Audrey. The manipulation was so calculated, so cruel, that it left me breathless. My own mother was painting my loving fiancé as an abuser to justify her behavior. That night, as Ryan and I sat shell-shocked in our apartment surrounded by canceled vendor contracts, I realized we were facing more than just a wedding crisis. This was about whether I would finally stand up for myself and the life I wanted, or continue living under my mother's control. I don't know what to do, I admitted. She's never going to stop, is she? Ryan took my hand. No, she's not. So we have to decide if we're going to fight back or walk away. Looking into his eyes, I made my choice. We fight back, together. The morning after my mother's devastating text, Ryan and I sat at our kitchen table with cups of coffee growing cold as we reassessed our situation. The wedding we'd planned was financially out of reach without my parents' contribution, but we refused to let that stop us. We're starting from scratch, I said, opening a new spreadsheet. What can we actually afford on our own? Ryan squeezed my hand. Let's talk to my parents. They won't be able to contribute much, but they'll want to help. That weekend, we drove to the modest hotel where Ryan's parents were staying during their visit. They'd extended their trip to help with wedding preparations, never expecting the chaos that would unfold. Unlike the sterile, criticism-filled environment of my childhood home, being with Thomas and Patricia Campbell felt like stepping into a warm embrace. Their hotel room was small, but Patricia had somehow made it cozy, with family photos propped on the dresser and the handmade quilt my mother had sneered at spread across the bed. "Oh, sweethearts," Patricia said when we explained what had happened, pulling me into a hug that smelled like cinnamon and comfort. "I'm so sorry." Thomas, a carpenter with calloused hands and a gentle demeanor, sat beside his wife. "What can we do to help?" "We need to scale back significantly," Ryan explained. "We can cover some ourselves, but—" "We've been saving," Thomas interrupted. "It's not a fortune, but we set aside $8,000 for your wedding day. It's yours." I felt tears spring to my eyes. This couple who had never had much in terms of material wealth had saved for years to contribute to their son's happiness. "That's incredibly generous," I said, my voice catching. Patricia took my hand. "Family supports each other, Audrey, real family." The contrast with my own parents couldn't have been more stark. As we planned a new, simpler celebration, I felt a strange sense of liberation. For the first time, this wedding was truly about Ryan and me, not about status or appearances. My first act of rebellion was returning the family heirloom jewelry my mother had loaned me for the wedding, pieces that came with her explicit commentary about how they would elevate my appearance. I placed the antique diamond earrings and necklace in their velvet box and drove to my parents' house. Judith opened the door with a cold expression that faltered momentarily when she saw what I was holding. "I'm returning these," I said, handing her the box. "Our wedding won't be the society event you wanted, so these won't be needed." "Don't be ridiculous," she snapped. "You're overreacting, as usual." "No, I'm finally reacting appropriately. Ryan and I are still getting married, just without your control or money." Her face hardened. "If you go through with this embarrassment of a ceremony, don't expect to be welcomed at family events. There will be consequences, Audrey." "There already have been consequences," I replied. I've spent my entire life trying to earn your approval. I'm done. As I turned to leave, she called after me. You'll regret this when you're living in some cramped apartment, cut off from everything you've grown up with. I didn't tell her that such a life, one built on love rather than manipulation, sounded like paradise. The fallout was swift. Family members began calling, some concerned, others accusatory. My Aunt Helen, who had always been a buffer between my mother and me, called sounding conflicted. Sweetheart, I know your mother can be difficult, she said carefully. But is it worth tearing the family apart over a wedding? This isn't about the wedding, Aunt Helen. It's about whether I get to make my own choices in life. She sighed. Your mother says Ryan is turning you against the family. That's exactly the kind of manipulation I'm talking about, I said, disappointment washing over me as I realized even Helen was falling for my mother's narrative. The most painful betrayal came from an unexpected source. Madison, my friend since childhood, had been helping with our revised wedding plans. One afternoon, I walked into my apartment to find her quickly pocketing her phone, looking guilty. What are you doing? I asked. Nothing, just checking the time, she said, but her face was flushed. Acting on a suspicion, I asked to see her recent photos, claiming I wanted to look at dress ideas we'd discussed. After initial resistance, she handed over her phone. There, in her gallery, were pictures of our new wedding venue options, budget spreadsheets, and guest list. You're spying for my mother, I said, the realization hitting like a physical blow. Madison's eyes filled with tears. It's not like that. She was worried about you, said you were making a huge mistake. And she paid you to report back? Madison's silence was answer enough. How long has this been going on? I demanded. She looked away. Audrey, your mother always pays people to keep tabs on you. She did it in college too, had your roommate Brittany update her regularly. The revelation that my mother had been surveilling me for years left me reeling. So many relationships suddenly seemed suspect. How many people in my life were actually informants for my mother? As Madison left, apologizing profusely, I stood in my living room feeling more alone than ever, yet paradoxically more determined. If my mother had gone to such lengths to control me, then my independence must truly threaten her in some fundamental way. That night, Ryan held me as I processed this new information. I feel like I'm seeing my entire life clearly for the first time, I told him, and I'm starting to wonder what else she's been hiding from me. Little did I know that Madison's revelation was just the tip of the iceberg. The truth about my mother's control ran much deeper and darker than I could have imagined. The discovery that my mother had been paying people to spy on me for years sparked something in me, a determination to uncover what else she might have been hiding. I started with old journals I'd kept in high school and college, reading them with new eyes. Patterns emerged that I hadn't recognized before. Friendships that mysteriously dissolved when those friends encouraged my independence. College advisors who steered me away from studying abroad despite my interest. Even the coincidence of landing an internship at a company where my mother's friend was an executive. But the most interesting discovery came when I was going through a box of childhood mementos and found my sister Charlotte's old journal. I hadn't meant to pry, but a page fell open to an entry that caught my eye. Mom says Princeton isn't the right fit for me, that I should go to Stanford instead because it's closer to home, but I've dreamed of Princeton since I was 12. Dad won't stand up to her. No one ever does. Charlotte had ended up at Stanford, eventually meeting her husband Gregory there. I'd always thought it was her first choice. This revelation suggested a pattern of control that extended beyond my own experience. I arranged to meet Charlotte at a park near her house, away from my mother's sphere of influence and the prying ears of Gregory, who reported everything to my mother. When I showed her the journal entry, her face went through a series of emotions: shock, anger, and finally, a resigned sadness. You shouldn't have read my journal, she said weakly. I know, and I'm sorry. But Charlotte, don't you see the pattern? She's been controlling both of us all our lives. Charlotte's initial defensiveness was strong. She wants what's best for us. She's always supported us. Has she? Or has she supported the versions of us that fit her vision? I pressed further, sharing what I'd learned about my mother's surveillance. Charlotte looked genuinely surprised. She wouldn't do that, she insisted, but I could see doubt creeping into her expression. Did you know Grandmother Eleanor left a trust fund for both of us? I asked, testing a theory. Charlotte's confusion seemed genuine. What are you talking about? Grandmother left everything to Mom. That's what Mom told us, but I'm not sure it's true anymore. As we talked, Charlotte's perfect facade began to crack. She admitted to ongoing struggles with our mother, how Judith constantly criticized her parenting, her home, even how she dressed her children for family photos. But I can't just cut her off, Charlotte said, her voice small. Greg's position at the firm depends on Dad's connections. Our whole life is entangled with them. The conversation ended with Charlotte still conflicted, but I'd planted a seed. As we parted, she hesitantly shared one more piece of information. There's a file in Dad's home office labeled Eleanor Estate. I saw it once when I was looking for some tax documents Mom asked me to find. This lead proved invaluable. I contacted my law school friend Tasha, who specialized in estate law, and shared my suspicions. If your grandmother intended the money to be split and your mother circumvented that, there could be serious legal implications, she explained. But you'd need documentation. The confirmation came from an unexpected quarter. Using the information Charlotte had provided, I gained access to the relevant court records. My grandmother had indeed established separate trusts for both Charlotte and me, with my mother as trustee until we turned 30, an age I would reach in less than 2 years. The implications were staggering. My mother had been controlling us with money that was rightfully ours all along. I confronted my father at his office, knowing he would be alone there after hours. Walter Mitchell looked older than his 58 years as I laid out what I'd discovered. Did you know? I demanded. Did you know Mom was hiding our inheritance from us? My father's shoulders sagged. Your mother felt you girls weren't ready to handle that kind of money. She worried it would lead you astray. That wasn't her decision to make. Grandmother wanted us to have financial independence. Your mother. She's always had strong ideas about family loyalty, he said weakly. She believes keeping the money under central control preserves the family legacy. You mean preserves her control? I countered. For the first time in my life, I saw my father's complicity clearly. He wasn't just a passive bystander to my mother's manipulation. He was an active enabler. I'll talk to her, he promised half-heartedly. Don't bother, I replied. I'll be handling this myself. I was halfway to the elevator when his voice stopped me. Audrey, be careful. Your mother doesn't respond well to being challenged. The warning came too late. That evening, my phone rang with my mother's number. What did you say to your father? She demanded without preamble. The truth. Something this family could use more of. You, ungrateful little. She caught herself. If you think you're going to come between me and what I've built, you're sorely mistaken. Her voice turned coldly threatening. You'll regret crossing me, Audrey. I've given you everything, and I can take it all away just as easily. As I hung up, I realized the woman on the other end of the line was a stranger to me, not a mother who had my best interests at heart, but someone who saw me as property, an extension of herself to be controlled rather than a person to be loved. The battle lines were drawn, but I had underestimated just how far my mother would go to maintain her power. I knew my mother would retaliate, but I wasn't prepared for how calculated and comprehensive her counterattack would be. She didn't just aim to hurt me, she set out to dismantle my entire life. The first blow came at work. I was called into my director's office on Monday morning to find him looking uncomfortable, with HR present. Audrey, we've received some concerning information about your conduct, he began. My confusion must have been evident because he continued hesitantly. Your mother contacted us with allegations that you've been sharing confidential client information with your fiancé's startup. I was stunned. That's completely false. We understand, but we need to investigate given the seriousness of the claim. In the meantime, we're removing you from the Westbrook account. Westbrook was my biggest client. I had spent a year building that relationship. This is ridiculous, I protested. Check my emails, my communications. I've never shared anything confidential. We'll conduct a thorough review, the HR representative assured me. But until then, we need to take precautionary measures. As I left the meeting, I noticed colleagues averting their eyes. Rumors had clearly begun to circulate. The isolation was immediate and palpable. Ryan faced similar sabotage. The angel investor who had committed to funding his software startup suddenly pulled out, citing concerns about company leadership. When Ryan pressed for details, The investor reluctantly admitted that someone had contacted him with troubling information about Ryan's personal character and financial history. They said you had gambling debts, he told Ryan, and a history of business failures you'd covered up. Both accusations were completely fabricated, but the damage was done. Without that investment, Ryan's company was in jeopardy, along with the personal funds he'd already committed. Our financial pressure mounted rapidly. The new modest wedding venue we'd secured called to inform us that they'd had to cancel our reservation due to an anonymous complaint about potential code violations at our event. We lost another deposit. The stress began to affect our relationship. One night, after learning that our revised catering order had also been canceled, we had our first major fight. Maybe we should just elope, Ryan suggested, his voice tight with frustration. Go to the courthouse and be done with it. So she wins? I shot back. We just give up and let her control this too? This isn't about winning, Audrey. It's about us starting our life together without all this drama. Easy for you to say. You didn't grow up with her controlling every aspect of your existence? Ryan's face hardened. No, I grew up with parents who respected my choices, who taught me that family supports each other instead of tearing each other down. His words stung because they highlighted exactly what I'd never had. I'm sorry my family is such a disappointment, I said coldly. That's not what I meant and you know it, he replied. But I'm starting to wonder if this fight is worth it. We're losing money we don't have, my business is in jeopardy, and you're so focused on battling your mother that I feel like our relationship is taking a back seat. He grabbed his jacket. I need some air. I'll be back later. As the door closed behind him, I sat alone in our apartment, surrounded by the wreckage of our wedding plans. For the first time, I considered that maybe my mother had won after all. Maybe the cost of standing up to her was simply too high. I was contemplating calling the few remaining vendors to postpone the wedding when there was a knock at my door. I opened it to find Charlotte standing there, looking nervous. Can I come in? I stepped aside, surprised by her unexpected visit. I've been doing some thinking, she said, perching awkwardly on the edge of my couch. About what you said about Mom's control. I waited, not wanting to push her. The thing is, she continued, not meeting my eyes, I helped her with some of this. Some of what? The sabotage, she admitted quietly. I was the one who told her about your new venue, and I called your caterer pretending to be you and canceled the order. I felt like I'd been slapped. Why would you do that? Because she's always pitted us against each other. Charlotte burst out, tears suddenly streaming down her face. If I please her, you suffer. If I stand with you, I become the target. Do you have any idea what it's like living under her scrutiny all the time? At least you escaped. I stood there, absorbing this new betrayal from the one person I thought might eventually stand with me. You should go, I said, my voice hollow. After Charlotte left, I sat alone in my apartment, truly believing I had no one left. My family had turned against me, my workplace was compromised, my fiancé was questioning our relationship, and even my wedding, the simple, authentic celebration we'd tried to create, was in shambles. For the first time since this all began, I considered surrendering. Perhaps I could call my mother, apologize, accept her terms. Return to the fold as the dutiful daughter she wanted me to be. The thought made me physically ill, but so did the prospect of fighting this battle alone. I was at my absolute lowest point, wondering if I had the strength to continue, when my phone rang with a number I didn't recognize. The unknown number on my phone belonged to Barbara Wilson, a name that sounded vaguely familiar, though I couldn't immediately place it. Her voice was elderly but strong. Audrey, you don't know me well, but I was your grandmother Eleanor's closest friend for over 40 years. I've been trying to reach you for some time, but your mother has been intercepting my attempts. A faint memory surfaced, a white-haired woman at my grandmother's funeral 5 years ago, being pointedly excluded from the family gathering afterward. Why are you calling me now? I asked. Because I recently learned about the situation with your wedding. Small towns have big mouths, she added with a slight chuckle. I believe it's time you knew the truth about several things. We arranged to meet the following day at Silver Pines Nursing Home, where Barbara now lived. When I arrived, I found not the frail elderly woman I'd expected, but a sharp-eyed, elegant 75-year-old sitting upright in a comfortable chair, a lockbox on the table beside her. Your grandmother knew your mother better than anyone, Barbara began after we'd exchanged pleasantries. She loved Judith, but she harbored no illusions about her character. That's why she took certain precautions with her estate. From the lockbox, Barbara removed a bundle of letters tied with a faded ribbon. Eleanor wrote these to you and your sister over the last years of her life. Your mother told us you didn't want them, that you found her sentimental ramblings embarrassing. I took the letters with trembling hands. I never received any letters. I would have treasured them. I thought as much. Barbara nodded. There's more. Your grandmother's fortune, the money that built your mother's real estate empire, wasn't inherited from your grandfather as your mother claims. Eleanor built that wealth herself, investing wisely after your grandfather left her with nearly nothing. This revelation shifted my understanding of our family history. My mother had always portrayed my grandmother as a society wife who'd lucked into wealth. Your grandmother was determined that you girls would have financial independence, Barbara continued. She knew firsthand how vulnerability could lead to control. From the lockbox, she produced a manila envelope containing legal documents. Eleanor left copies with me as well as her attorney. These established the trusts in your and Charlotte's names. There are also provisions your mother has likely violated as trustee, which could potentially remove her control even before you turn 30. As I leafed through the documents, I felt a complex mixture of emotions: vindication that my suspicions were correct, rage at my mother's deception, and a profound sadness at having lost the opportunity to know my grandmother as she truly was. When I returned home that evening, Ryan was waiting for me. His expression was contrite. "I'm sorry about last night," he said immediately. "I was frustrated about the investor, but I shouldn't have taken it out on you. We're partners in this, all of it." I showed him the letters and documents from Barbara. Together, we spent hours reviewing everything, with Ryan researching legal precedents on his laptop. "This is huge, Audrey," he said finally. "With these documents, a good lawyer could make a strong case for breach of fiduciary duty." "It's not just about the money," I said. "It's about the truth, about breaking this cycle of control once and for all." Over the next week, Ryan and I worked together to rebuild what my mother had torn down. We met with Curtis Freeman, a trust attorney Tasha had recommended, who confirmed that we had a solid case. "The terms of the trust are quite clear," he explained. "As trustee, your mother was obligated to act in your best interests, not her own. Using your inheritance to control your behavior represents a serious breach." Our confidence grew as we developed a plan. Ryan's cousin Javier, who managed a small event space in a renovated industrial building, offered it to us at cost for the wedding. Friends rallied around us, offering help with decorations, food, and music. Most surprisingly, Charlotte called one evening. "I've been doing some soul-searching," she said, "and I want to help make things right." "Why should I trust you now?" I asked, still hurt by her earlier betrayal. "Because I've realized we're both victims in this. And because I've decided to do something Mom can't punish me for." Charlotte had secretly copied key financial documents from our father's home office, records showing how our mother had commingled trust assets with her personal funds and made investment decisions that benefited her companies at the Fozen, ADHEA, expense of the trusts. "She'll know it was me," Charlotte said. "But I don't care anymore. I'm tired of living in fear of her disapproval." With each piece that fell into place, the venue, the documentation, the growing support network, I felt myself becoming stronger. The woman who had once sought her mother's approval at any cost was gone, replaced by someone who understood her own worth, wasn't determined by Judith Mitchell's assessment. Ryan noticed the change too. "You stand taller now," he observed one evening as we finalized the guest list for our revised wedding. "Like you've set down a heavy weight you've been carrying your whole life." I smiled at him. "I think I have, and I'm never picking it up again." For the first time since this ordeal began, I felt truly confident that we would not only survive my mother's attempts to control us, we would emerge stronger for having fought back. The wedding we were now planning wasn't a compromise or a scaled-back version of some grander vision. It was authentically us, meaningful, intimate, and built on genuine connections rather than social obligations. In fighting for this wedding, I realized I was fighting for the life I truly wanted. As our attorney prepared to send formal notice to my mother regarding the trust violations, I felt not anxiety but a strange sense of peace. The battle wasn't over, but I was no longer fighting alone, and for the first time, I believed we could win. Armed with the documents Barbara had provided and Charlotte's financial evidence, our attorney Curtis Freeman prepared a formal legal letter outlining the trust violations and our intent to petition for my mother's removal as trustee. We delivered it to both my parents, certified mail with signature required. The response was immediate. My phone rang barely an hour after delivery confirmation. "What is the meaning of this?" my mother demanded, her voice unusually high-pitched with panic. "Exactly what it says," I replied calmly. "You've mismanaged funds that were legally mine and Charlotte's. We're exercising our rights under the trust agreement. This is absurd. I've always acted in your best interests. By hiding our inheritance? By using it to control our life choices? That's not what grandmother intended, and you know it." There was a long pause before she spoke again, her voice now calculating. "What do you want, Audrey? Money for your wedding? Fine. Name your price, and we can forget this nonsense. This isn't a negotiation strategy, Mom. This is about ending the control you've had over us our entire lives." After she hung up, Ryan squeezed my hand. "Round one to you." Our next step was more public. We arranged a family gathering at my Aunt Helen's house, ostensibly to clear the air about the wedding situation. My mother refused to attend, but most of the extended family came, curious about the ongoing drama. With Charlotte beside me for support, I shared what we'd discovered about our grandmother's intentions and our mother's deception. I passed around copies of key documents, watching as confusion, then understanding, then outrage crossed the faces of aunts, uncles, and cousins who had always seen my mother as the family's unquestioned authority. "So all these years, the wealth she's lorded over everyone actually came from Eleanor?" my Aunt Patricia asked, visibly shocked. "And she's been controlling the girl's inheritance while pretending it was her own generosity?" added Uncle Robert. The family's perception of my mother began to shift before my eyes. Questions emerged about other instances of manipulation, other truths that might have been distorted. I always wondered why Eleanor's collection of Art Nouveau pieces went missing from the inventory after her death, mused my cousin Rebecca. "Your mother said they'd been donated according to Eleanor's wishes, but it never sounded right to me." By the end of the gathering, the family dynamic had fundamentally changed. My mother, who had ruled through a combination of financial power and information control, was suddenly facing challenges from multiple directions. Charlotte and I left together, both feeling lighter despite the gravity of what had transpired. "She's going to be furious," Charlotte said as we walked to our cars. "Probably. But what else can she do to us that she hasn't already tried?" The answer came the next day when my father called, sounding tired and defeated. "Your mother hasn't slept. She's been making calls all night," he said. "I've never seen her like this." "Like what, Dad? Facing consequences for her actions for the first time?" He sighed heavily. "She's threatening to divorce me if I don't fix this. Says I've failed as a husband and father by not controlling you girls." For the first time, I felt a glimmer of sympathy for my father. He'd been under my mother's thumb for so long he'd forgotten how to stand upright. "You don't have to fix anything, Dad. You just have to decide which side of history you want to be on." The next phase of our plan involved the wedding itself. With our new venue secured and a simpler celebration planned, we sent out revised invitations to everyone except my mother. We included a brief, factual note explaining that due to circumstances beyond our control, the original wedding plans had changed. The strategic exclusion of my mother while including my father and the rest of the family was calculated to isolate her socially, the very tactic she had tried to use against me. Local society circles, which had been my mother's power base for decades, began to buzz with gossip about the situation. Her carefully cultivated image as the family matriarch began to crumble as different versions of the story circulated. Charlotte's decision to stand with me, rather than our mother, was particularly damaging to Judith's narrative. My mother made one last desperate attempt to regain control. She appeared unexpectedly at my office, causing heads to turn as she swept past reception. "I've been thinking," she announced without preamble, "and I'm prepared to be magnanimous. We'll fund the wedding as originally planned. Whatever venue you want, whatever details you prefer." I studied her face, noting the strain around her eyes and mouth. This wasn't generosity, it was a last-ditch effort to re-establish her position. "No thank you," I said quietly. "We don't need your circus." Color flooded her cheeks. "You're making a terrible mistake." The only mistake I made was thinking I needed your approval to be happy. As she left, I felt a strange combination of sadness and strength. The mother I had wanted, one who could love me unconditionally, had never existed. Accepting that truth was painful but necessary. At work, the investigation into my mother's false allegations concluded with my complete exoneration. My director called me in to personally apologize. "We've confirmed there was no basis to any of the claims," he said. "In fact, your work on the Westbrook account has been exemplary. We'd like to offer you the lead on their upcoming campaign as acknowledgement of our error." Ryan experienced a similar reversal of fortune when a new investor approached him, impressed by how he'd handled the previous setback. The funding came through at even better terms than the original offer. As our wedding day approached, the pieces of our lives that my mother had tried to scatter were coming back together, stronger than before. We weren't just surviving her attempts to control us, we were flourishing despite them. The final confirmation that the tide had turned came when my father called to say he'd moved out of the family home. "I should have done this years ago," he admitted. "For you girls, if not for myself." The battle wasn't completely won. Legal proceedings regarding the trust would take months to resolve, but the balance of power had shifted irrevocably. My mother, who had always ruled through fear and financial leverage, found herself increasingly isolated and opposed. As Ryan and I finalized details for our wedding, I realized that my mother's attempt to cancel our celebration had instead catalyzed a transformation that was long overdue. In trying to control my wedding, she had ultimately freed me from a lifetime of seeking approval I would never receive. The day before our wedding arrived with a surreal sense of calm. After months of turmoil, the revised plans had come together beautifully. Javier's industrial space had been transformed with string lights, greenery, and simple white flowers. Nothing like the ostentatious display my mother had pushed for, but perfect in its authenticity. Ryan and I were at the venue for the rehearsal dinner, greeting our small group of truly supportive friends and family, when a commotion at the entrance caught everyone's attention. My mother had arrived, uninvited and clearly determined to make her presence known. She stood in the doorway, immaculately dressed as always, surveying the scene with visible disdain. The room fell silent as all eyes turned toward her, then back to me, waiting to see how this confrontation would unfold. I took a deep breath and approached her, conscious of Ryan close behind me, ready to intervene if necessary. "Mom, you weren't invited to this." "So I gathered," she replied coldly. "I had to hear about my own daughter's wedding rehearsal from the florist, of all people." "What do you want?" I asked, keeping my voice level despite the adrenaline coursing through me. She glanced around at the watching crowd. "I'd prefer to speak privately." "No," I said firmly. "Whatever you have to say, you can say it here. These people have supported us through everything you've done to sabotage our wedding and our lives." Something flickered across her face, perhaps surprise at my directness, or annoyance at being denied her preference for behind-closed-doors manipulation. "You're making a spectacle of family matters," she hissed. "This isn't how we handle things." "You mean this isn't how you handle things?" I corrected her. "Control through isolation isn't going to work anymore." Charlotte approached, standing beside me in a show of solidarity that clearly caught our mother off guard. "Both of you?" Judith said, her voice rising slightly. "After everything I've done for this family?" "This isn't a family," I replied, loud enough for everyone to hear. "It's a dictatorship, and we're done living under your rule." My mother's carefully maintained composure began to crack. "You ungrateful children have no idea what I've sacrificed for you. I've protected you, provided for you, made sure you had every advantage." "You've controlled us," Charlotte countered. "There's a difference." I felt a strange sense of calm as I realized this confrontation was long overdue. "You've never seen us as individuals with our own dreams and choices. We were just extensions of you, pieces to move around according to your vision." "That's not true," she protested, but her voice lacked conviction. "It is true," my father's voice came from behind her. Walter Mitchell stepped into the room, looking both nervous and determined. "And I've been complicit in it for too long." My mother whirled to face him, truly shocked for perhaps the first time in this entire ordeal. "Walter, what are you doing here?" "Supporting our daughters," he said simply, as I should have done many times before. The public abandonment by her husband, the one person who had always backed her plays, visibly shook my mother. Her carefully constructed facade of family unity was crumbling before everyone's eyes. "This is ridiculous," she sputtered. "Walter, come with me right now. We'll discuss this at home." "No, Judith," he replied, his voice stronger than I'd heard it in years. "I'm staying for my daughter's rehearsal dinner. You can either join us civilly or leave." It was at that moment that a courier arrived, asking for Judith Mitchell. With everyone watching, my mother was served with legal papers regarding the trust fund mismanagement, the formal court petition we'd prepared with Curtis. As she scanned the first page, the color drained from her face. For the first time in my life, I saw my mother completely lose control. The careful mask of sophistication and composure shattered as she realized the extent of her exposure, legally, financially, and socially. "You can't do this," she said, her voice barely audible. "This is my money. I built this family." "No, Mom," I said gently, finding that my anger had been replaced with something closer to pity. "Grandmother built it. And she wanted all of us to share in it, not just you." With trembling hands, she stuffed the papers into her handbag. "This isn't over," she managed, but the threat sounded hollow. As she turned to leave, I called after her. "Mom, you're still welcome at the wedding tomorrow. Not as the controller, but as a mother. It's your choice." She didn't respond, walking out with as much dignity as she could muster. As the door closed behind her, I felt an almost physical release of tension throughout the room. Ryan's parents approached immediately, enveloping me in a warm embrace that contrasted sharply with the cold confrontation that had just occurred. "We're so proud of you," Patricia whispered in my ear. "Both of you," she added, including Ryan in the hug. As the evening proceeded, there was a palpable sense of liberation. What should have been a tense, emotional rehearsal dinner instead became a celebration of authenticity and new beginnings. Charlotte and I found moments to truly connect, without our mother's manipulative presence creating artificial competition between us. Late that night, as Ryan and I prepared to part ways until the ceremony, he had insisted on honoring the tradition of not seeing each other before the wedding. Barbara arrived with a small velvet box. "I was saving this for tomorrow," she said, "but after what happened tonight, I think you should have it now." Inside was my grandmother Eleanor's wedding necklace, a delicate strand of pearls with a small diamond pendant. "She wanted you to have this when you married," Barbara explained. "It was in her will, though I'm not surprised Judith never mentioned it." As I fastened the necklace around my neck, I felt a connection to the grandmother I'd never truly known but who had, in her own way, tried to protect me from exactly the control I'd finally escaped. That night, alone in our apartment surrounded by wedding preparations, I reflected on the journey that had brought me here. When my mother had sent that text canceling our wedding funding, I'd felt devastated, believing she had destroyed something precious. Instead, she had inadvertently set me free from a lifetime of manipulation. Tomorrow, I would marry Ryan exactly as we had wanted all along, surrounded by genuine love rather than social obligation. The road ahead might still hold challenges, particularly as the legal battle over the trusts proceeded, but for the first time, I faced the future on my own terms, not my mother's. I woke on my wedding day to sunlight streaming through the curtains and a sense of peace I hadn't felt in months. Our wedding wouldn't be the lavish society event my mother had envisioned, but it would be genuinely ours, every detail chosen with love rather than obligation. Charlotte arrived early with coffee and pastries, along with Ryan's mother Patricia and my closest friends. As we prepared together, the atmosphere was joyful and relaxed, so different from the tense, approval-seeking environment I'd grown up in. "You look absolutely beautiful," Patricia said as she helped me with my hair. I'd chosen a simple dress, not designer, but perfect for me, and my grandmother's pearl necklace. "Thank you," I replied, genuinely touched. "For everything. You've shown me what supportive family really looks like." While my bridesmaids were busy with final preparations, there was a soft knock at the door. Charlotte answered it, then turned to me with surprise. "It's Dad," she said quietly. Walter Mitchell stood in the hallway looking simultaneously nervous and determined. In his hands was a small, wrapped package. "Can I speak with you alone for a moment?" he asked. Once the others had discreetly stepped out, my father approached awkwardly. "I've been a coward, Audrey," he began. "For your entire life, I stood by while your mother controlled and manipulated you girls. I told myself I was keeping the peace, but really, I was just avoiding conflict at your expense." His honesty was unexpected and moving. "I can't change the past," he continued. "But I want you to know that I'm finally trying to do better. I've filed for divorce." I stared at him in shock. "Dad." "It's long overdue," he said firmly. "I should have protected you and Charlotte. I failed at that, but I'm trying to make it right now." He hesitated before asking, "Would you still like me to walk you down the aisle today?" Tears filled my eyes. "I would," I managed to say. He handed me the package. "This was your grandmother's. Your mother kept it locked away, but it rightfully belongs to you." Inside was a delicate silver bracelet with a small sapphire charm, something I vaguely remembered seeing my grandmother wear when I was very young. "She wanted you to have her something blue for your wedding day," my father explained. "I should have given it to you long ago." As he fastened it around my wrist, I felt a connection not just to my grandmother, but to a family legacy that wasn't defined by my mother's controlling vision. The ceremony itself was everything Ryan and I had wanted from the beginning: intimate, personal, and filled with genuine emotion rather than social performance. Standing before our closest friends and family in the beautifully transformed industrial space, we exchanged vows we had written ourselves. "Audrey," Ryan said, his voice steady and sure, "I fell in love with your strength long before I fully understood just how strong you truly are. I promise to stand beside you as your partner in all things, to support your independence while offering my hand whenever you reach for it, and to help build the authentic life we choose together." My own vows acknowledged the journey we'd traveled. "Ryan, you've shown me what real partnership looks like, not control disguised as care, but true support that helps me become more fully myself. I promise to carry that lesson into our marriage, to always communicate honestly, to respect your autonomy as I've learned to claim my own, and to love you freely and joyfully for all our days." As I scanned the guests during the ceremony, I noticed my mother's absence. Despite my invitation the previous night, she had chosen not to come. While there was a momentary pang of sadness, it was overshadowed by the genuine love filling the room. The reception that followed was full of laughter, dancing, and heartfelt toasts, a celebration that reflected who we truly were rather than who anyone expected us to be. Ryan's cousin Javier had transformed the industrial venue into something magical with simple strings of lights and greenery. Friends had contributed homemade desserts alongside the modest cake we'd ordered. The music was played by Ryan's college roommate's band, their energy infectious. Charlotte raised her glass in a toast that brought tears to my eyes. "To my sister and her husband, thank you for showing me what courage looks like. Your strength has helped me find my own." As the evening progressed, I received news that the court had granted an emergency injunction regarding the trust funds, effectively freezing my mother's access pending a full hearing. It wasn't a complete resolution, but it was a significant first step toward financial independence. 1 month after the wedding, I agreed to meet my mother for lunch at a neutral location, a cafe downtown, far from either her social circles or our family homes. She arrived precisely on time, dressed impeccably as always, though I noticed a new tension around her eyes. "You look well," she said stiffly as she sat down. "Thank you," I replied. "I am well." We ordered, making awkward small talk about the weather until our food arrived. Finally, she set down her fork with deliberate care. "The divorce papers came through yesterday," she said. "Your father is really going through with it." "I know," I replied, "he told me." She nodded, a flicker of something. Hurt? Resignation? Crossing her face. "And the trust hearing is set for next month." "Yes." We ate in silence for a moment before she spoke again, her voice uncharacteristically uncertain. "I don't understand what happened, Audrey. Everything I did was to give you girls the best life possible. The problem was that you decided what best meant without ever asking what we wanted," I explained. "You didn't raise daughters, you tried to create extensions of yourself." She flinched slightly at my directness. "I wanted to protect you from making mistakes." "Making mistakes is how people grow," I countered. "By taking away our choices, you took away our chance to become ourselves." My mother didn't apologize. I hadn't expected her to. But there was a thoughtfulness to her expression that suggested my words had at least registered. "Where do we go from here?" she asked finally. "That depends on you," I said honestly. I'm not cutting you out of my life, Mom, but I'm also not going back to how things were. If you want a relationship with me, with any of us, it has to be on equal footing, with respect for boundaries and choices. She didn't commit to anything, but the fact that she'd asked the question at all represented a tiny step toward potential change. It wasn't forgiveness exactly, but it was an opening, a possibility that with time and effort, something healthier might eventually grow. That evening, as Ryan and I sat in our new apartment looking through wedding photos, I reflected on the journey of the past few months. "Look at your face here," Ryan said, pointing to a candid shot taken during our first dance. "You look completely free." I studied the image, seeing the joy and confidence in my expression. "I feel free," I admitted. "Not just from my mother's control, but from needing her approval. I don't think I realized how much of my life was spent trying to earn something she was never going to give." Ryan put his arm around me. "You know what I love most about these photos? Everyone in them is actually happy to be there. No one's posing or performing. It's all real." "Real," I repeated, savoring the word. "That's what we've built, isn't it? Something real." As I looked at the photos, Charlotte laughing with Ryan's brother, my father dancing somewhat awkwardly but genuinely with Patricia, friends and family united by authentic connection rather than obligation, I understood that my mother's attempt to cancel our wedding had given me the greatest gift possible. In fighting for the celebration we wanted, I'd discovered the courage to fight for the life I deserved. The journey wasn't over. There would be legal proceedings, difficult conversations, and undoubtedly more attempts at manipulation. Building healthy boundaries after a lifetime of control wouldn't happen overnight. But the foundation had been laid. Not just for my marriage to Ryan, but for a new understanding of what family truly meant. What do you think you would have done in my situation? Would you have fought back or tried to make peace? Share your thoughts in the comments below. If this story resonated with you, please like and subscribe for more real-life experiences that might help others going through similar struggles. Don't forget to hit that share button if you know someone who needs to hear that standing up for yourself isn't selfish, it's necessary. Thank you for listening to my journey, and remember, sometimes the families we build are more important than the ones we're born into.